All right. So we are officially starting. Acha ji. So a little recap of the previous class. A little recap of the previous class. We were talking about organic chemistry, right? And organic chemistry is um, all right. So organic chemistry is the study of carbon and compounds related to carbon, right? The main character in this topic is carbon. Okay. We started off with a definition of a term called hydrocarbon. Okay. Hydrocarbon. What is a hydrocarbon? A hydrocarbon is a compound which contains only carbon and hydrogen. Okay. There is absolutely no third element present in this compound. अगर इसके अंदर oxygen, nitrogen, कोई भी आपको alongside carbon and hydrogen element दिखा, that is not classified as a hydrocarbon. We did some examples. This is a hydrocarbon, this is a hydrocarbon, and this one is not. Why? Because इसमें oxygen present है. It is a must. It is an absolute non-negotiable कि hydrogen और carbon हो और इसके अलावा कोई और element ना हो. अच्छा जी. फिर we discuss some types of hydrocarbons. We said that they are classified into saturated and unsaturated hydrocarbons. Saturated meant that they have a single carbon to carbon bond. Okay, carbon will be bonded to another carbon with a single bond. This line shows a bond. This line shows a bond. Okay. So और इसकी example as stated in your syllabus is an alkane. इसके अंदर carbon और carbon के बीच में single bond होता है. अच्छा जी. Then we have an unsaturated hydrocarbon. Simple. An unsaturated one has multiple bonds between carbon atoms. For example, a carbon to carbon double bond or a carbon to carbon triple bond, right? And iske andar we had an example which we call alkene. And an alkene is a compound jiske andar carbon or carbon ke beech mein double bond hota hai, right? Triple bond is not an alkene. Triple bond is definitely an unsaturated hydrocarbon, but alkene is a type of unsaturated hydrocarbon that has only carbon to carbon double bond. ठीक है. अच्छा जी. So what are alkanes? Alkanes, we discussed that they did not have a functional group. What is a functional group? We will discuss that again. An alkane is a saturated hydrocarbon. Why saturated? Because carbon-carbon single bond. And why hydrocarbon? Because carbon and hydrogen only. There is absolutely no third element present there. Okay? Achha. We said that all alkanes obey the general chemical formula, or obey the same general chemical formula. In fact, this is something I should fix. Just give me a moment. Achha. The same general chemical formula. Acha ji. What is the general chemical formula? For example, this is a general formula. It says CnH2n plus 2. What does this mean? Where n is the number of carbon atoms. It says कि अगर carbon atoms जितने भी number of carbon atoms होंगे उस compound में, उस alkane में, we double that and then we add 2 to it, उतने हमारे पास carbon atoms होंगे. For example, अगर हम कहें कि if n is equal to 1, then for example C1H2 into 1 is 2 plus 2, that will be CH4, and that is exactly what the molecular formula shows for this compound. Okay? And its name was methane. This ane came from the part of alkane. Ane means it is an alkane. These sare suffixes ane, this shows कि ये alkane है. And meth gives it away that this has one carbon atom. Remember, ठीक है, ये जो prefix है, this prefix only and only refers to carbon atoms. ठीक है, I'll get your questions. I can't see the chat right now. I will get to your questions in a couple of minutes. Don't worry. ठीक है. ETH means 2 carbon atoms. PRO means 3 carbon atoms. Bute means 4. Pent, you know, pentagon is a polygon with 5 sides. I'm pretty sure you guys know that from mathematics. Hexagon again with 6 sides. So you know, pentane has 5 carbons. Hexane has 6. Heptane 7. Octane comes from the. It's very easy to remember this with the example of an octopus. An octopus has 8 legs, right? So since 8 carbons will be known as an octane, an alkane with 8 carbons is going to be known as an octane. Acha ji. C9H20 nonane and C10H20 decane. Acha ji. Acha ji. Then we talked about these compounds, and we talked about them in terms of their displayed formula, right? अब यहाँ पे तो हमने molecular formula में तो लिखा है कि कितने carbons और कितने hydrogens है. But when we talk about displayed formulas, we do talk about how these carbons and hydrogens are actually distributed, right? So basically we say कि अच्छा अगर CH4 है तो a carbon, since a carbon group belongs to group 4, it belongs to group 4. ठीक है, it has 4 valence shell electrons, and in order for it to achieve stability, stability comes from the octet rule. If it obeys the octet rule, it is stable. What is the octet rule? It has to have 8 valence electrons, 8 valence shell electrons, right? It needs to have 8 valence shell electrons. If it currently has 4, it needs 4 more, right? It needs 4 more. How would it have 4 more electrons? Is that it will bond itself to 4 different elements. For example, this bond will give it 1 extra electron that this hydrogen and carbon will be bonded, and यहाँ से इसको एक electron मिलेगा, यहाँ से भी एक extra मिलेगा, यहाँ से भी एक extra मिलेगा, जो कि hydrogen अपना share करेगा, right? The electron that hydrogen is sharing, this hydrogen is sharing one, this hydrogen is sharing the second one, the third one, the fourth one. It already had 4, so 4 plus 4, it will have 8 electrons now. अच्छा जी, so that is why all in all a carbon has to form 4 bonds in order to achieve stability. अच्छा जी, तो ये 4 bonds इर्द-गिर्द बना लेता है. अच्छा, since methane is a hydrocarbon and METH gives it away that it has only one carbon, we draw one carbon. ठीक है, अब इसके अलावा हम कार्बन और नहीं ड्रॉ कर सकते, बट वी नो कि इट्स अ हाइड्रोकार्बन और हमने इसे 4 बॉन्ड्स पूरे करने हैं फॉर इट टू बिकम स्टेबल, सो वी ऐड 4 bonds together and we have no other choice but to give it hydrogens. Why? Because it is an alkane and alkane is a hydrocarbon. That is why this is how it is. Ethane maybe we draw one carbon and we draw a second carbon. Why? Because ETH gives it away that it has 2 carbons, और carbon to carbon single bond होगा. क्यों? Because it's an alkane. ANE alkane के अंदर single bond होता है. This is a saturated one. ठीक है, and once we've done this, then we look at both carbons individually. For example, हम इस कार्बन को पहले देखते हैं. हम कहते हैं कि इसने ऑलरेडी एक बॉन्ड कार्बन के साथ बनाया हुआ है, इसे 3 और बॉन्ड्स चाहिए. वो 3 और बॉन्ड्स किसके साथ बनाएगा? क्या ये कार्बन के साथ बनाएगा? नो, बिकॉज इट्स इथेन. इथेन हैज 2 कार्बन्स ओनली. 2 कार्बन्स तो हमने ड्रॉ कर लिए, तो बाकी तीनों बॉन्ड्स बनाएगा हाइड्रोजन के साथ. 1 हाइड्रोजन, 2 and 3, 1 2 and 3. And if you look at the molecular formula, if you count the hydrogens 1 2 3 4 5 6, you have 6 hydrogens, you have 2 carbons. This also obeys the general formula. If after drawing the displayed formula and expressing that in terms of a molecular formula, your molecular formula does not agree with the general formula. For example, अगर general formula से answer different आ रहा है और इससे answer different आ रहा है, that means that you have probably made some sort of mistake. Then we talked about structured formula, right? And a structural formula is basically a displayed formula ही इसको condense करके लिखा हुआ है, right? For example, a molecular formula, it shows that CO₂ H₃, but it does not show कि कौन से कार्बन के साथ कितने हाइड्रोजन है, right? उनकी डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन नहीं पता चलती. So basically, in order for us to tell how the hydrogens are distributed around the carbons, we talk about structural formula. This is the first carbon and this is the second one. The first has 3 hydrogens attached to it, so we say CH3. This is that first carbon, right? And the second one has 3 hydrogens attached again, we say CH3 again. Same goes for this. This is butane. हमने इसका molecular formula भी इसी तरह से draw किया. And then we saw the first carbon, it had CH3, 3 hydrogens attached. The second one had 2, we said CH2. Third one maybe 2, CH2, and the last one also had 3, so CH3, right? So this is basically telling you the distribution of hydrogens around the carbon atoms, right? Or you can say it's a squeezed version of the displayed formula. हमने इस चीज को squeeze कर दिया into this. ठीक है, हमने इस चीज को squeeze कर दिया into this, and so on and so forth, right? हमने instead of showing the bond, we just said okay, CH3, this is assumed that these 3 hydrogens are around carbon. ठीक है, same goes for alkenes. Alkenes have a carbon to carbon double bond. Again, this is its functional group. What that is, I'll talk to you about that later. Alkenes are unsaturated hydrocarbons. Unsaturated meant the double bond or a triple bond or a multiple bond, right? Hydrocarbon means KKK. A hydrocarbon means कि कार्बन एंड हाइड्रोजन के अलावा इसके अंदर कोई और एलिमेंट नहीं होगा, राइट? एंड एल्कीन्स की स्पेशल प्रॉपर्टी है कि इसमें कार्बन टू कार्बन डबल बॉन्ड होता है. ऑल्दो अनसैचुरेटेड मींस के डबल ट्रिपल कोई भी हो सकता है, बट एल्कीन्स आर स्पेशल इन द केस कि इसमें डबल बॉन्ड होते हैं. ठीक है, ऑल एल्कीन्स ओबे द सेम जनरल केमिकल फार्मूला CnH2n. जितने भी नंबर ऑफ कार्बन एटम्स होंगे उससे डबल हमारे हाइड्रोजन एटम्स होंगे. अगर कार्बन 2 है, हाइड्रोजन 4 होंगे. कार्बन 3 है, हाइड्रोजन 6 होंगे, so on and so forth. We did that. N is equal to 2 C2H4. Again, the naming convention was the same. ETH, the prefixes remained the same because ETH means 2 carbons, PRO means 3 carbons, BUT means 4 carbons, and again the suffix changed to ENE rather than ANE. ANE hota to this meant alkane, and ENE hai to this means alkene, right? So that is the only difference here. Displayed formula just like that. हमने 4 carbons draw किए, and then after we drew these 4 carbons, we had to make sure कि अच्छा कार्बन टू कार्बन डबल बॉन्ड तो होना है. Now this was our choice. हम यहाँ डबल बॉन्ड बना दें या हम यहाँ बना दें यहाँ. But the thing is कि you only have to draw one double bond, right? You can absolutely draw more as well, but अपने syllabus के scope में रहते हुए I would always say कि एक ही double bond आपने draw करना है, not multiple ones, right? On your level, you only have to draw one, not more than one. ठीक है? I chose कि अच्छा जी मैं इनके दरमियान बना लेता हूँ. Then I looked at this carbon. It had 1 bond here. It needed 3 more. I drew 3 hydrogens. इसके पास 1 2 3 इसने already bonds किए हुए थे. 1 hydrogen चाहिए थी, मैंने 1 hydrogen बना दी. Same goes for this, and same goes for this. I drew the molecular formula. I drew the structural formula, and that is the same way as we did with an alkane. अच्छा जी, a functional group is an atom or a group of atoms that determine the chemical properties of a homologous series. What is a homologous series? It's like a family of compounds. For example, alkanes is a homologous series on itself. Alkenes on itself. This is a family of compounds, and that family has members. For example, alkene के members हैं ethene, propene, butene, pentene, and so on and so forth. अच्छा जी. The part of the compound that participates in chemical reactions, basically that is the functional group, right? For example, अगर कार्बन टू कार्बन डबल बॉन्ड है, इसको देखते ही पता चल रहा है दिस इज एन अल्कीन, this must be an alkene, and this is the part that determine the chemical properties of alkene. Alkene can undergo addition reaction, right? Addition reaction जो कि हम आगे जाके पढ़ेंगे, it only happens because carbon to carbon double bond है, right? ये double bond ना हो तो ये वाली chemical properties की ना हो, addition reaction ये perform ना कर सके. So this is a defining feature of a series of compounds or a homologous series. And it is also the part that participates in chemical reactions. The reason I said earlier कि functional group जो है alkane के पास नहीं होता, alkene का functional group is carbon to carbon double bond, ठीक है? But an alkane does not have a functional group. Why? You might argue that carbon to carbon single bond can be a defining feature of alkanes, but that is not the case. Why? Why is that not the case? Because देखो alkenes के अंदर भी carbon to carbon single bonds हैं, right? It's not something that is only unique to alkanes. Alkanes के अंदर भी होते हैं, but alkenes के अंदर भी होते हैं, right? So that is just something that is very general and not something unique, just specific to alkanes only. So we do say कि alkanes का कोई functional group नहीं है. Alkenes का, however, is a functional group, and that is this one. Okay, carbon bonded to another carbon. In case you guys were not on the previous class and you still don't understand it, obviously I am trying to go through this as soon as possible. If you guys have any confusions, I would recommend कि आप जाके YouTube पर पिछली video देखें. You will definitely understand what I'm talking about. And a homologous series is basically alkanes. Alkenes ये सारे जो families हैं of compounds, they are all homologous series. Alkane is one, alkene is one, alcohols are another, carboxylic acids are another. Every member of the series has the same general chemical formula. We did discuss that earlier as well. देखो C4H8, C5H10 ये सारे CnH2n general formula को obey कर रहे हैं, ठीक है? They have different molecular formulas, but they all obey the same general formula. अच्छा जी, they differ from one member to the next by a CH2 unit, ठीक है? For example यहाँ पे एक कार्बन ज्यादा हो गई और दो हाइड्रोजन ज्यादा हो गए, राइट? इफ यू लुक एट दिस, फ्रॉम दिस टू दिस वी हैव वन मोर कार्बन एंड टू मोर हाइड्रोजन, राइट? एंड फिर यहाँ से यहाँ भी देखो तो वन मोर कार्बन, 3 से 4 गया, एंड हाइड्रोजन 2 और हो गई, 6 से 8 गया, राइट? सो बेसिकली इट्स डिफरिंग बाय अ CH2 ग्रुप, a CH2 group, ठीक है? And this is in alkenes, and the same way it goes for alkenes as well. For example, यहाँ से यहाँ भी we see 1 से 2 we have one carbon, and 4 से 6 we have two hydrogens that have been added, and same goes here as well. So in both cases CH2 group से it is increasing, right? They have the same functional group, ठीक है? And that is why they have the same chemical properties. Why? Because we said कि जो functional group होता है that is responsible for its chemical properties. अगर functional group ही एक homologous series का same है तो उनकी chemical properties भी same होंगी. They will undergo the same type of reactions. However, they show a gradual change in their physical properties. They show a gradual change in their physical properties. For example, boiling points increase down the homologous series. Flammability decreases as we go down. Viscosity increases, and physical properties will change. The chemical properties will not. We discussed the reasoning for this in detail in the previous class. I won't go through that again. For that, I would recommend watch the videos. Any questions up till now? So let me know. If you have any questions up till now, let me know. अच्छा जी, we can see the screen. Do we need to memorize all of these examples? कौन से examples आए ना? Which examples? The naming, alkane, alkene की जो है, for example, methane, methene, वो वाली? अच्छा, yes, you will have to memorize, but honestly ये इतना मुश्किल नहीं है memorize करना. Mostly आपका syllabus जो है पहले 4 के साथ डील करता है. MET से याद रखो 1 कार्बन, ETH से 2, प्रोपीन इज 3 कार्बन वाला alkene, ठीक है? इस तरह से याद रखो. कुछ तो वैसे याद हो जाते हैं ना. फॉर एग्जांपल यू हैव पेंटेन, PENT, पेंटागन से 5, हेक्सागन से हेक्स 6, 6 कार्बन, ऑक्टोपस से ऑक्टेन 6 कार्बन वाला alkene, right? So but again there is no other way around it. You will have to memorize it. Any other questions? Sir, what about we will discuss isomers today. We will discuss isomers today, don't worry. ठीक है, आई थिंक मेनली जस्ट 5 कार्बन्स तक. यस, मेनली 5 कार्बन्स तक ही होता है. और सिलेबस स्कोप इज लिमिटेड, बट इफ यू नो उससे आगे भी थोड़ा बहुत तो दैट्स ओके. डोंट ऑब्सेस टू मच ओवर इट. आपको वैसे ही कर करके याद हो जाएगा, ठीक है? अच्छा जी, ऑलराइट ऑलराइट ऑलराइट, ठीक है. Okay, perfect. I don't think we have any more questions. Let me see who is in the call. Ishal has joined. She was in the last class as well. Moaz has joined. He was in the last class. Abdurrahman, Tabeen. Tabeen is new. Momin, I don't think he joined earlier as well. Hasnain. ठीक है, ठीक है. Okay, okay. All right. So what we are going to discuss now, I think there was another person. Isa is with me as well. Oh, okay, okay. Okay, that makes sense. ठीक है. So I think you guys are joining from the same ID. Okay, perfect. Naming of alkenes. ठीक है. What are we now going to do? अच्छा जी, before we move to isomerism, we will do that in the second half because that is a very long topic. उससे पहले थोड़ा सा I will have to give you the context with regards to how the naming nomenclature works for this class of compounds. इनको naming कैसे करते हैं और that is going to take quite a lot of time. So before that, let's just talk about reactions of hydrocarbons. Let's talk about reactions of hydrocarbons. Okay, reactions of hydrocarbons, and in particular, what we will discuss today, we will only discuss the reactions of alkanes. Okay, I hope the screen is visible. Reaction of hydrocarbons. ठीक है, हाइड्रोकार्बन्स के रिएक्शंस के व्हाट काइंड ऑफ रिएक्शंस डू दे अंडरगो. अच्छा, एंड हाइड्रोकार्बन्स के अंदर अगेन वी हैव अल्केन्स and we have alkenes. Why? Because these are the classes of compounds, these are the families of compounds that have carbon and hydrogen only. ठीक है, कार्बन एंड हाइड्रोजन ओनली. अगर कोई आपसे कहे कि अल्केन और अल्कीन में एक सिमिलैरिटी बताओ तो दैट इज कि बोथ ऑफ देम आर हाइड्रोकार्बन्स, बोथ ऑफ देम हैव कार्बन एंड हाइड्रोजन ओनली. और अगर कोई आपसे इसके डिफरेंसेस बताओ तो यू विल से कि अल्केन इज सैचुरेटेड, दैट मींस इट हैज अ कार्बन टू कार्बन सिंगल बॉन्ड, कार्बन टू कार्बन सिंगल बॉन्ड. हाउएवर अल्कीन इज अनसैचुरेटेड, इट हैज अ कार्बन टू कार्बन डबल बॉन्ड. ठीक है, इट हैज अ कार्बन टू कार्बन डबल बॉन्ड. अच्छा जी, so let's discuss the reactions of alkanes. ठीक है, alkanes can undergo three types of reactions जो कि आपको आपके सिलेबस के हिसाब से जानने की जरूरत है. And those three types of reactions are, the first one is combustion. The first one is combustion. The second one is cracking. ठीक है, and the third one is substitution. We will discuss all of these reactions in detail. This is what the first half of our class is going to be dealing with. अगर हमारे पास टाइम हो तो isomerism हम जितनी आज कर सकेंगे हम करेंगे. Combustion and substitution for alkanes. Yes, sir, will we get the notes when it's finished? Yes, you will, Aima. I will provide you all the notes once the classes are finished. But वो आपको मैं end पे दूंगा जब हमारी पूरी organic chemistry class हो जाएगी. ठीक है, मतलब लाइक चारों दिनों की हमारी क्लासेस हो जाएंगी only and only then. अच्छा जी, so let's discuss number one. Let's discuss combustion. Let's discuss combustion. अच्छा जी, all right, all right. अच्छा जी, so combustion is further divided into two types. Combustion is further divided into two types, and one is complete combustion, ठीक है, and the other is incomplete combustion. ठीक है, अच्छा, अब combustion is something burning in the presence of oxygen and forming something, right? For example, we can have sulfur burning in the presence of oxygen and it can form sulfur dioxide, right? We can have carbon burning in the presence of oxygen and it can form carbon dioxide, right? इसमें दोनों में common condition ये कि they are burning, we provide heat to them. ठीक है, so these are examples of combustion reactions, right? So today we will discuss combustion of hydrocarbons and in particular अभी alkanes की बात करते हैं. अच्छा जी, now we have two types of combustion. One is a complete combustion and the other is incomplete combustion. जो complete combustion होती है, it happens in the presence of oxygen, in the presence of excess oxygen. I beg your pardon, oxygen तो दोनों cases में होती है in the presence of excess oxygen. ठीक है, अच्छा, why excess oxygen? Why? Because जब हम ऑक्सीजन को एक्सेस में देते हैं, जितनी उसकी जरूरत है उससे ज्यादा ऑक्सीजन सप्लाई कर देते हैं, दैट इज व्हेन वी इंश्योर कि कंबशन कंप्लीट हो गई है, राइट? कि कंप्लीटली वो कंबस्ट हुआ है, वट एवर क्लास ऑफ कंपाउंड इज दैट वी आर ट्राइंग टू कंबस्ट, वो पूरी तरह से कंबस्ट हुआ है वाकई. बिकॉज अगेन देखो, अगर ऑक्सीजन ही लिमिटेड है, इफ ऑक्सीजन इज लिमिटेड, अगर ऑक्सीजन ही खत्म हो रही है तो ऑब्वियसली वो कंबशन कंप्लीट हो ही नहीं पाएगी, राइट? सो इट इज इंपॉर्टेंट दैट फॉर कंप्लीट कंबशन टू टेक प्लेस वी हैव टू हैव एक्सेस ऑक्सीजन. व्हाट इज द डिफरेंस बिटवीन कंप्लीट एंड इनकम्प्लीट कंबशन? दैट इज व्हाट वी विल डिस्कस नाउ. अच्छा जी, चलो लेट्स डिस्कस. अच्छा जी, for example, I say, अच्छा, and one important thing that I want you to take note of is, one important thing is that complete combustion of hydrocarbons produces carbon dioxide and water only. Complete combustion of hydrocarbons, again, hydrocarbons may both alkanes and alkenes are a part. Hydrocarbons, complete combustion of hydrocarbons forms carbon dioxide and water only. ठीक है, only ये दो products आपको मिलेंगे, and this is only and only limited to complete combustion, right? This is only and only limited to complete combustion. This does not apply to incomplete combustion. उसके अंदर we have a small sort of difference जो कि हम discuss करेंगे. ठीक है, this is sort of a golden rule that you need to remember. अच्छा, for example, अब हम कोई हाइड्रोकार्बन लेते हैं. Let's start with the most basic alkane, और उसमें होगा ये कि let's start with methane. ठीक है, methane, and I say कि मैं इसको ऑक्सीजन में burn कर रहा हूँ, right? And I provide heat to it. For example, I expose it to a flame. ठीक है, let's try it with yellow. आई एक्सपोज इट टू अ फ्लेम which means मैं इसको heat up कर रहा हूँ, ठीक है, I am providing heat to it, I am essentially burning it. The products will be carbon dioxide and water, ठीक है. Just like that, अगर if I talk about for example C3H8, this is propane, this is तीन carbons वाला propane, and it will react with again oxygen. I expose it to a flame and it forms carbon dioxide and water, ठीक है. I expose it to a flame and it forms carbon dioxide and water. अच्छा, अब this is how it is happening. One very important thing जो कि इसके अंदर है, that is you should know how to balance these equations, and I will give you a simple set of rules so that you never ever get this wrong. What that set of rules is, the first rule is कि balance the number of carbon atoms such that जो left पे carbon atoms हैं आप उतने ही carbon atoms आपके right पे हो, ठीक है. Number one rule is equal number of carbon atoms, ठीक है. How will we have equal number of carbon atoms? We'll see कि अच्छा लेफ्ट साइड पे तीन कार्बन एटम्स है, राइट पे एक है. What will we have to have as a coefficient here कि कार्बन एटम्स बैलेंस हो जाए, राइट. यहाँ तीन है तो हम कोएफिशिएंट में यहाँ भी तीन लिखेंगे. मेक सेंस? अच्छा ठीक है जी. अच्छा नंबर टू दिस वाज द फर्स्ट स्टेप एंड दिस अप्लाइज टू ऑल केसेस जिसके अंदर आप कंप्लीट कंबशन ऑफ हाइड्रोकार्बन्स में डील कर रहे हो, बी इट इवन एन एल्कीन, राइट. These are the rules जो कि they do not change. अच्छा C3H8 reacting with oxygen forming carbon dioxide and water. We said कि अच्छा यहाँ पे तीन कार्बन थे, हमने कार्बन को बैलेंस कर दिया, जितने यहाँ पे सबस्क्रिप्ट में थे उतना ही हम यहाँ कोएफिशिएंट ले गए. कूल. लेट्स बैलेंस द नंबर ऑफ हाइड्रोजन्स. अच्छा अब यहाँ पे वी हैव 8 हाइड्रोजन्स, राइट. अब हाइड्रोजन्स को बैलेंस करने के लिए वी हाफ दिस नंबर, राइट. वी डिवाइड 8 by 2 and we get 4 and that is what goes as a subscript here, ठीक है. और यू कैन लुक एट इट फ्रॉम दिस पर्सपेक्टिव कि अच्छा यहाँ पे 8 हाइड्रोजन्स है, आफ्टर कार्बन वी विल बैलेंस हाइड्रोजन्स. अगर यहाँ 8 हाइड्रोजन्स है, यहाँ पे मैं किस नंबर से मल्टीप्लाई करूं कि हाइड्रोजन भी 8 हो जाए, राइट. दीज आर 2, वी विल ऑब्वियसली मल्टीप्लाई इट बाय 4, 4 into 2 is 8, राइट. आप इसको इस रेफरेंस पे भी देख सकते हो. अच्छा सो और इन अदर रेफरेंस यू कैन से कि अच्छा जी 8 हाइड्रोजन्स है, वी विल डिवाइड 8 by 2, वी विल गेट 4 एंड दैट इज द नंबर दैट गोज इन दिस सबस्क्रिप्ट. तो यहाँ पे हम लिखेंगे 4. अच्छा जी अब यू कैन सी यहाँ तीन कार्बन, यहाँ 8 हाइड्रोजन, यहाँ 4 into 2 8 हाइड्रोजन. दिस इज बैलेंस्ड. अच्छा नाउ वी हैव टू बैलेंस ऑक्सीजन. अब ऑक्सीजन हम लेफ्ट पे देखेंगे एंड देन वी विल ऐड अ सबस्क्रिप्ट हियर दैट बैलेंसेस ऑक्सीजन. अच्छा जी 3 into 2 we have 6 oxygens and then we have 4 into 1 we have 4 oxygens, so total of 10 oxygens, right. अब इन ऑर्डर फॉर अस टू बैलेंस इट टू 10 ऑक्सीजन हम लेफ्ट पे देखते हैं कि O2 है, हम क्या ऐसा यहाँ पे कोएफिशिएंट लिखें कि वो बैलेंस हो जाए, राइट. 2x is equal to 10. What will that x be? This x is the coefficient. That x will be 10 over 2 is equal to 5. हम यहाँ 5 ऑक्सीजन लिखेंगे तो यहाँ भी 10 हो जाएंगे, राइट. Because 5 into 2 is 10. And यहाँ पे already we have 6 into 2 6 and we have 4. So 6 plus 4 is equal to 10 oxygens here. तो यहाँ 10 और 10 they will be balanced. So that is why हम यहाँ पे 5 oxygens लिखेंगे, right. So this is a set of rules that you need to know. First rule, so repeat it with me, repeat it in your head. That is कार्बन एटम जितने लेफ्ट पे हैं उतने ही हम राइट पे बना देंगे. कैसे? जो यहाँ पे सबस्क्रिप्ट है, फॉर एग्जांपल जो यहाँ पे सबस्क्रिप्ट है दैट विल गो हियर एज अ कोएफिशिएंट. डन, डस्टेड. नंबर 2, जितने यहाँ हाइड्रोजन एटम्स में सबस्क्रिप्ट में नंबर लिखा है उसको हम 2 पे डिवाइड करेंगे एंड दैट इज द वन दैट विल गो इन द सबस्क्रिप्ट ऑफ वाटर एंड हाइड्रोजन्स बैलेंस हो जाएंगे, ठीक है. नंबर 3, अब यहाँ पे हम राइट पे देखेंगे, यहाँ पे हम राइट पे देखेंगे कितने ऑक्सीजन है. 3 into 2 दैट इज 6, 4 into 1 दैट इज 4. हम इन्हें ऐड करेंगे 10 ऑक्सीजन और फिर हम यहाँ पे कोई ऐसी टर्म लिखेंगे जो कि 2 से मल्टीप्लाई होकर 10 दे एंड दैट इन केस इज 5, ठीक है. सो द ऑर्डर विल बी कि फर्स्टली बैलेंस कार्बन, सेकेंडली बैलेंस हाइड्रोजन्स, आई बेग योर पार्डन, हाइड्रोजन, एंड थर्डली बैलेंस ऑक्सीजन, ठीक है. Thirdly balance oxygen and this is how we will do it. Let me do another example with you. For example, I say C6H14, this is hexane and I say it reacts with oxygen. I provided a flame, ठीक है. And what happens is it forms carbon dioxide and it forms water. अच्छा now again first rule, कार्बन कितने कार्बन है? 6. हम यहाँ पे कितने लिखेंगे? 6, ठीक है. बिकॉज यू सी यहाँ पे 6 कार्बन होंगे तो 6 कार्बन बैलेंस है. अच्छा जी लेट्स सी हाइड्रोजन. व्हाट डिड वी से अबाउट हाइड्रोजन? जो हाइड्रोजन के सबस्क्रिप्ट में नंबर होगा उसे हम 2 से डिवाइड करेंगे एंड दैट इज द नंबर दैट गोज इन द कोएफिशिएंट ऑफ वाटर, राइट. ऑब्वियसली यू कैन से कि अच्छा 7 into 2 विल मेक 14, राइट. हमें यहाँ 14 हाइड्रोजन्स बनाने हैं तो वी से कि वी राइट 7 एज अ कोएफिशिएंट टू वाटर. ठीक है, and at the end we say 6 into 2 12 and 12 plus 7 we have 19 oxygens. अच्छा जी, अब 19 oxygens हम किसको 2 से मल्टीप्लाई करें कि 19 हो जाए, किसको 2 से मल्टीप्लाई करें कि 19 हो जाए, we will multiply 19 over 2 with 2, that will make 19, right? So obviously we can, and that is something I want you to know, in case of organic equations you can write it, you can balance it in terms of fractions as well. So we will say 19 over 2, we will say 19 over 2. Any questions up till now? I hope you guys get it. Acha. All right. So give me a moment. Okay. एक second रुको. Yes, you will get the notes. Combustion substitution. Acha, add 4, add 5. I'm sorry, I was not looking at your comments. First reaction भी कर दें 7. First reaction में hydrogen balance नहीं है. First reaction में, yes, that is correct. First reaction में hydrogen balance नहीं है. I did not balance it. I wanted कि आप लोगों को ये rules वगैरह पता चल जाए. Because first में you see number of carbon atoms आपने balance नहीं कर रहे थे. I wanted कि आपको order में पहले carbon, फिर hydrogen, फिर oxygen पता चल जाए. So that is why I did this before. It just completely slipped out of my mind. Thank you, thank you, thank you, everyone. Any confusions up till now? Type in the chat if this is clear. Type in the chat if this is clear. Clear. Perfect. Perfect. Okay. I hope it is clear to everyone as well. मुझे बाकी भी बता दें so that I can proceed. No confusion. Okay. Okay, boss. Perfect. अच्छा, let's talk about incomplete combustion now. अच्छा, यहाँ पे एक alkene की भी example कर लें, because again this is a reaction that also applies to alkenes. Or we'll discuss that when we do alkenes. Never mind. अच्छा, let's talk about incomplete combustion now. We have incomplete combustion. अच्छा, complete combustion में होता यह था कि हमारे पास एक excess supply of oxygen होती थी, right? We had an excess supply of oxygen so that we ensure कि combustion complete हुई है, right? Whatever compound, whatever hydrocarbon that we are combusting, we make sure that compound has combusted completely. But in the case of an incomplete combustion, what happens is that we have a limited amount of oxygen, right? We had a limited supply of oxygen. We had limited supply of oxygen. Okay, it's not enough for it to burn completely, for the compound to combust completely. And what happens as a result is just like I had a golden rule earlier, and we have another golden rule, and it says that the products will be carbon monoxide, which is a toxic gas, which is a very toxic gas, and some carbon soot. This is a black sort of carbon, and that essentially is carbon alone. ठीक है, carbon alone को हम carbon soot भी कहते हैं if the examiner uses this word, although it is very unlikely that he will, but if it says carbon soot or it says black carbon soot, that is carbon alone. ठीक है, carbon monoxide, carbon soot, and of course this is something that will produce in case of an incomplete combustion. ठीक है, and carbon dioxide and water can also produce, right? CO2 और water भी produce हो सकते हैं, can also produce, but the thing is कि this is essentially the difference कि carbon monoxide and carbon will be produced. ठीक है, can also be produced. अच्छा जी, for example अब basically होता ये है कि you see carbon monoxide is toxic, it is very toxic, it is very damaging to our environment, right? It is very damaging to our environment. So that is why this is not a good thing कि combustion incomplete हो, right? That is why हम हमेशा जब भी combustion deliberately करना चाह रहे हो, हम oxygen को excess में देते हैं ताकि complete combustion हो. Why is that? Because we do not want carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. That is a side note I would want you guys to know as well, right? Carbon monoxide is a toxic gas. And it damages the environment, right? And also if you inhale it, it damages your hemoglobin as well. Hemoglobin is a pigment found in your blood. If you take biology, you would know that it is also damaging to your hemoglobin as well. It damages the environment, and it's also damaging to hemoglobin. Okay, or I may write the spellings completely. That is something people often struggle with. I'm not sure if I wrote these correctly. Do correct me if I was wrong. But yeah, this is something you should know. Acha ji. So, for example, let's write an equation for incomplete combustion, right? Let's write an equation for incomplete combustion. We can say okay, CH4, it reacted with oxygen, okay, and it formed carbon monoxide, and it formed carbon, and it formed, say, water, right? So again, we what we did was कि अच्छा number let's balance the number of carbons. देखिए right पे एक है, left पे दो हैं. What will we do कि right पे ये balance हो जाए, sorry left पे balance हो जाए? We will add a 2 here, right? Let's balance the number of hydrogens. Now we have 8 here. 8 divided by 2, that is 4, and that is the only way. 4 multiplied by 2 will make 8. That is the only way कि this makes sense. We will write 4 in the coefficient here. Okay, we will write 4 in the coefficient here. And now let's balance the number of oxygens. We have 1 plus 4. We have 5 oxygens there, and in order for it to be balanced, हम यहाँ पे लिखेंगे 5/2. You see, so now this is balanced, and this is that toxic gas that we were talking about. This is that toxic gas that we were talking about. Okay, I hope this makes sense. I hope that this makes sense. This is basically all you need to know with regards to combustion of hydrocarbons, combustion of alkanes. You have any questions, do let me know before we do cracking. Can also be referred to as particulate, right? Yes, it is referred to as particulate in some books. I don't think that you are required to be aware of these terminologies, but it's always good to know. There needs to be a 2 in front of the O2 in the first reaction. Which reaction are we talking about? Which reaction are we talking about here? Okay, 4 plus 4, you have, yeah, there needs to be a 2 there. This equation completely slipped out of my mind. Thank you, Ishal. There needs to be a 2 at the end. Again, it followed the same principles. First, balance the carbon atoms. One here, already balanced. Hydrogens, 4 divided by 2. That is the one that goes here in the subscript. 2 into 2 hydrogens balance as well. 4 hydrogens on each side. Now let's balance the number of oxygens. 2 oxygens here, plus 2 oxygens here, 4 oxygens. What will be the number that we add as a coefficient so that we have 4 oxygens here? We write 2 into 2, that is 4. Hence, the oxygens are also balanced. Yes, perfect. You see, it completely slipped out of my mind as well. And that goes on to show you that if you do not follow the rules, it might slip out of your mind as well. So obviously follow the rules. Carbon followed by hydrogen and then followed by oxygen. I hope this is all clear. Right. Type in the chat if it is. Type in the chat if you want me to move to the next reaction, next type of reaction that alkanes undergo. Quick, I want answers, I want confirmation so that I can go ahead. Clear. ठीक है, Ayama, ठीक है. I hope this is good. Okay, so that is good to know. अच्छा जी. Just give me a moment. I cannot see your chat. Yes, now I can. Perfect. अच्छा जी. Chalo, let's talk about substitution. Substitution is a reaction I really like. I really like to talk about it. So we will do this before we do cracking. Substitution reaction. Actually, as the name suggests, substitution. What do you think substitution suggests? What do you know by the term substitution? You see, you solve simultaneous equations in mathematics using a substitution method. Substitute. You watch football, you watch soccer, and it says that a certain player has been substituted by a player who was initially on the bench. What do you mean by the term substitution? Adding, no, adding is completely different from substitution, right? Adding is completely different, right? Adding tab hota, dekho, football mein 11 players hote hain. We have 11 players and we say कि one of this player goes out and another one comes in, right? It still remains 11 players. Addition would be कि oh, अगर हम कहते कि player बाहर नहीं गया, we have 11 players and we substitute one and we say एक आ गया and now we have 12 players on the field. That is not what happens. You can only have 11 players per side in a soccer field, right? To merge in. I see what you mean there, but basically it means replacement. It means replacement, right? Just like in a football team, you see कि अगर एक player बाहर जाता है तो उसकी replacement के तौर पे एक अंदर आ जाता है, right? In cricket, if a player is injured, it goes out of the squad and one comes in to replace it. Just like that, I just realized I wrote the wrong spellings. So substitution. Give me a moment to correct this. अच्छा, substitution. ठीक है, perfect. अच्छा जी. So substitution reaction. Substitution basically means replacement. Substitution means replacement. ठीक है, and that means one thing is replacing another. एक चीज दूसरे को replace कर रही है. How does this apply in the context of alkanes? In the context of alkanes, it applies in the context of alkanes such that it is a replacement of, let me write this as a golden rule, uh, replacement of hydrogen atoms होते हैं alkane में, it's the replacement of a hydrogen atom by a halogen, right, by a halogen atom. अच्छा जी, what are halogens? Halogens are group 7 compounds, chlorine, bromine, iodine. Let's talk about how this fits into this context. अच्छा जी, replacement of hydrogen atom by a halogen. For example, and that brings us to a new term. That brings us to a new term, and that is halogenation of an alkane or in an alkane, right? Acha, you know, as the name suggests, कि this is an alkane, and halogenation means कि halogen कुछ ना कुछ alkane के साथ react करेगा to form something, right? अब वो कैसे होगा? Let's talk about it. For example, halogenation is any halogen being, reacted with alkene such that it replaces a hydrogen atom. That can be chlorine, that can be bromine, that can be iodine, that can be anything. For example, we talk about chlorine. And when we add chlorine, this is a reaction that is called, you can say that this is chlorination happening in an alkane, right? That is when we react chlorine with an alkane, and that chlorine atom, one of the chlorine atoms in this chlorine molecule, replaces a hydrogen atom in the alkane. Okay? How does that exactly happen? For example, let me see if you have chlorine replaces hydrogen. Pakistan, okay. So, chlorine replaces hydrogen. Okay, you're very right. Let's talk about it. Acha. So now in this case, chlorine will be our reagent. Chlorine will be our reagent that we're adding. Acha. In order for this reaction to happen, we have certain conditions. We have certain conditions that need to be met, and those conditions are that we need to provide it with sunlight. You need to provide it with sunlight. Why? Because sunlight contains ultraviolet rays. It contains ultraviolet, right? Basically, sunlight is for UV light. Okay. So if it says conditions, you can write UV light as well. You can write sunlight as well. I would prefer you write both. So yeah, sunlight, UV light, and heat, right? We heat it so that the reaction proceeds the way we want it. These are the conditions, right? Condition is something that is a non-negotiable, जिसके बगैर reaction नहीं हो सकता. UV light, sunlight के बगैर reaction नहीं हो सकता, right? And we do provide it with heat as well, so that the reaction proceeds the way we want it to. अच्छा जी. Let's talk about this. Acha. We can have methane, right? This is methane, and हम कहते हैं कि this reacts with chlorine. Let's say this is the chlorine. Actually, chlorine bonded with another chlorine, and this goes on to form something. अच्छा जी, अब होता क्या है बच्चों? होता ये है कि you see, this hydrogen, for example, gets replaced by या ये chlorine, right? Or this hydrogen can get replaced as well. This hydrogen can get replaced as well. This one can get replaced as well. Okay? So let's assume that this hydrogen is getting replaced, right? Now this hydrogen, I drew a blue tick here, will will react or will combine with one of the chlorine atoms in this molecule. This is a chlorine molecule, right? This is one chlorine atom, and this is the second one. Okay? So this hydrogen will combine with one of these chlorine atoms and be liberated as HCl, right? What essentially happened is कि ये hydrogen और ये वाली chlorine reacted or got combined in a way and formed HCl. ठीक है, ये HCl बन गया. अच्छा, अब what happened is, since this hydrogen has left, इसकी जगह ये वाला chlorine आ जाता है, right? What essentially happened is कि this Cl says कि oh, hydrogen तो मेरे साथ आ जाओ. It takes this hydrogen away as HCl. And then what happens is this chlorine sees that, oh, this methyl group is, needs a fourth bond. This carbon needs a fourth bond. So this chlorine goes and attaches itself to the carbon. So what happens is we have CH, and then we have Cl. I'm only drawing this in red so that you know which chlorine atom I'm talking about. In the paper, you are not required to know, or you are not required to show this explicitly. This is just for your better understanding. So again, when Cl chlorine is reacted with methane in the presence of UV light, that is a very important condition. UV light is a non-negotiable. What happens is the replacement of a hydrogen atom by one of the atoms in chlorine happens, and HCl is formed as the process as a result. So now this is your organic molecule. Why? Because it has carbon. It has carbon. This is your organic molecule, and another inorganic molecule that is formed as a product is HCl. This is your inorganic molecule. Okay? I hope this makes sense. अच्छा जी. Now, अच्छा, this reaction does not have to stop here, right? For example, if we have chlorine in excess, अगर हम कहें कि chlorine हमने बहुत ज़्यादा की है, you see, first chlorine reacts with this, it forms this, but still we still have a lot of chlorine left. We still have ClCl left. This ClCl will react again with this, you know. So what will happen again? What will now happen is, okay, now this is the thing that we're talking about. This is the thing that we're talking about. We have hydrogens on these sides. We have, let's draw chlorine. Okay, and what happens is it reacts with the chlorine molecule again, and what happens as a result is okay, so as a result, okay, अब होगा ये, for example, this hydrogen has to take one, this chlorine has to take one of the hydrogen atoms with it. For example, ये वाला ले लेती है, right? So what happens is if this chlorine and this hydrogen escape as HCl, then this chlorine will replace the hydrogen that left. So what will happen is कि यहाँ पर we will have hydrogen. We already had a chlorine here, and now a new chlorine was added here, and as a result, यहाँ पे HCl produce हुआ, right? Again, the condition that is very, very important here is UV light as well. Actually, you see, now again, since this was in excess, we still have a lot of it left. This will react with this and form some new sort of molecule again. So let's go with that. I will look at your questions at the end. Actually, so what happens now is, okay, you see, this is hydrogen. You see, chlorines are here. It goes on and reacts with chlorine again. Or you see, now what happens is, okay, a new molecule will form. For example, we say, okay, acha, this hydrogen is the one that combines with this chlorine and forms HCl. So iski jagah aa jayega chlorine hamara. So let's say that. And here we have, you know, there we have this hydrogen. Ab yahan par we have chlorines. Hamare paas already we had this chlorine, and this hydrogen is also now replaced by a chlorine. And what happens as a result is this chlorine and this hydrogen, they are now liberated as HCl. Again, since this is an excess, this happens again as well. Now this molecule, you know, sort of reacts with chlorine again, and you know, we have H here. यहाँ पे we have chlorine on three sides. Okay, हमने अभी add किए. We said कि अच्छा, this reacts with chlorine again. So, and what it forms is, it forms HCl. Why? Because this chlorine and this hydrogen forms HCl, and as a result, यहाँ पर we have chlorine on all sides, right? Because since this was the H that escaped, combining with chlorine, forming HCl. So अब यहाँ पर ये वाला chlorine आ जाएगा. So what happens is Cl on all sides, right? अच्छा जी, so अगर आपने इसकी net equation लिखनी हो, again this is UV light again. UV light is the absolute non-negotiable. UV light, you have UV light. अच्छा जी, अगर आपने इसकी net equation लिखनी हो, तो what actually happens is, when you can say okay, chlorine reacted with this in excess and it formed this, right? So अगर मैं इसकी net equation लिखना चाहूँ, अगर मैं बीच के step को skip करूँ और मैं कहूँ कि okay, the net equation for this reaction, if chlorine is in excess, and that is something that shows up in the exam quite a lot. It wants to see if you know excess may actually how it's happening. So acha, what we say, acha, starting में we had CH4, right? And it was reacting with chlorine. Acha, it was reacting with chlorine, and what happened at the end, it formed CCl4. And it formed HCl. Let's balance this now. And so we have carbons already balanced. Let's see. We have 5 chlorines here. For example, 5 chlorines here. So 5/2. And I should balance hydrogens first. We have 4 hydrogens here. We will write 4 in the coefficient. It balances hydrogen. अच्छा, अब chlorine balance करनी है. We have 4 here and 4 here. 4 plus 4 will be 8. 8/2 will be 4. अच्छा, अब हो क्या रहा है? अब यहाँ पर हो क्या रहा है? You see, it says कि 4 chlorine molecules combined with one methane molecule to form one CCl4 molecule and four HCl molecules. If you look at all of this, if you look at what just happened here, how many CH4 molecules you see? This is CH4. क्या इसके अलावा इस पूरी कहानी में आपको CH4 दिख रहा है? No, this is not CH4. This is CH3Cl. This is CH2Cl2. This is CHCl3. Right? None of this is CH4. आपको सिर्फ एक दफा CH4 मिलता है. अच्छा जी. It says 4Cl2, right? This is Cl2. This is Cl2, this is Cl2, this is Cl2. 1, 2, 3, and 4. You can visually see that we definitely use 4 chlorine molecules throughout this. CCl4, this is the only place where you see CCl4. This is not CCl4, this is not CCl4. So we have one CCl4. It perfectly agrees with the steps we saw earlier. We have 4 HCl. You see 1, 2, 3, 4. We saw HCl being produced 4 times. So you see the net equation basically agrees with whatever happened, but it skips this middle part. It skips this, it skips this. Ye sara it skips. This tells you just the final story. It skips how the events progressed, but at the same time it does tell you that 4 chlorine molecules use हुए थे, 4 HCl molecules produce हुए, and that is how the reaction proceeds. That is how hydrogenation of an alkane happens in the presence of UV light or sunlight. Is this clear? Is this clear? Too much. This is a photochemical reaction. Yes, it definitely is. It definitely is a photochemical reaction. Why? That is a very good point. I must write that down for you. It is a photochemical reaction. This is because of the presence of UV light. Okay, this is a photochemical reaction. Thank you, Isa. Ishal, I beg your pardon, or whoever it was. Shadi, this is a photochemical reaction. So can you mention the state symbols? All right, just give me a moment. What's the name of this compound containing Cl? Achha. So basically, what the name of this compound containing Cl is, let's talk about charo stages, and let's see, what this compound is. Achha, this is chloromethane, right? Why will we say chloromethane? Because it has only one chloro, and that chloro has replaced that, Cl sort of radical has replaced a hydrogen, and it forms chloromethane. This one, however, is dichloromethane. Why? Because it has 2 chlorines. It has 2 chlorines. Okay. I don't have space here. Dichloromethane, and this one in the end is trichloromethane, as it says. Okay, I hope that is clear, Moaz. Trichloromethane, and this at the end is tetrachloromethane, and it is also known as chloroform. Okay, it is also known as chloroform. Okay, this is something you should be able to know. Just give me a moment. Okay, I hope this is clear. So chloromethane because it has 1 chlorine, dichloromethane because it has 2 chlorines, tri because it has 3, and chloroform because it basically has 4 chloromethanes. You can say it is a tetrachloromethane, and chloroform is the special name given to this compound where carbon is occupied by 4 chlorines on each side. Okay. So yeah. Let me see if we have any more questions. I will mention the state symbols, Ishal. Just give me a moment for that, because that is something that you are not usually tested on, but I will indeed let you know. Koi or questions hain? What is the name of? Acha. Any questions, or if it's not clear, if it is clear, do type in the chat. You type in the chat. It is clear. Ishal, is it clear? Momin, is it clear? Momin is not in the class. Hasnan, is it clear? Is it hydrogen chloride or hydrochloric acid? This is hydrogen chloride, basically. It's not an acid, it is hydrogen chloride. Okay, it is hydrogen chloride. Why? Because acid tab hota hai jab wo water mein dale, because acid gets its properties when it's dissolved in water, right? For example, we have HCl. This is water, or iske andar hum HCl dalein, it ionizes into H plus and Cl minus, and that is why we call it an acid, right? And acid only behaves as an acid when it's in water. Okay, when it is in water. Acha, you were talking about the, okay, Hasnan, I am glad you were talking about the state symbols. I just needed some confirmation. So basically, this is methane. Methane exists as a gas. Chlorine obviously exists as a gas. HCl also exists as a gas. Ab ye jo CCl वगैरह हैं, these exist as liquid. in case you wanted to know this. This exists as liquid. Why is that? Why is that happening the way it is? It again depends on the strength of intermolecular forces, and that sometimes depends on the number of electrons. Not sometimes, it always depends on the number of electrons. But you don't need to go into the reasoning, and you will almost never be asked to say कि अच्छा इसकी state symbol क्या है, right? आपको हाँ HCl hydrogen chloride exists as a gas, ये थोड़ा सा पता हो. Chlorine obviously is a halogen, it exists as a gas. हमने ये देखा है कि जो halogens हैं, and we will discuss that in the periodic table as well. As we go down, it goes from gas to solid, right? For example, नीचे अगर astatine है, that will exist as a solid, but अगर starting with fluorine है, that exists as a gas. मतलब उसकी strength of intermolecular forces down the group increase करती जाती है, right? And this exists as a gas because it exists group 7 के ऊपर ही, fluorine के बिल्कुल नीचे. And methane is a gas. Why? Because we did say कि okay, let me show you. जो कल हमने डिस्कस किया था कि there is a general change in the physical properties of these compounds, and I think you asked this question earlier as well, Ishil. कि for example, give me a moment. अच्छा रुको, अच्छा सो ये देखो, अब यहाँ पे we said कि नीचे जाते जाते the strength of intermolecular forces increases, राइट? और फिर होगा ये कि स्टार्ट में अगर कोई चीज गैस में एग्जिस्ट करने की टेंडेंसी है तो नीचे जाते जाते इट विल हैव अ टेंडेंसी टू एग्जिस्ट एज अ सॉलिड, और बीच में कुछ लिक्विड्स भी होंगे. Why is that? Because intermolecular forces are increasing. Intermolecular forces are increasing down the group, and when they are increasing, particles will be closer together. And जितने वो close हो, उतने ज़्यादा वो solid के करीब होते जाते हैं, right? So this exists as a gas, but अगर आप नीचे जाओ तो you see यहाँ पे gas है, this can exist as a liquid, and down the line something can exist as a solid as well. So CH4, since it's at the very start of the homologous series, it has less electrons, it has less strength of the intermolecular forces, so it exists as a gas. That is the reason for the existence of these compounds existing in the states that they are. Is it clear, Ishil? And that is hydrogen chloride. Is that clear? Ishil, समझ आ गया? Perfect. ठीक है. I am glad that you guys understood that. अच्छा जी. Okay, so the final sort of reaction is cracking. The final reaction is cracking. Before we move to cracking, let's have like an 8-minute break. This is 9:02 right now. Let's come back at 9:10, and then we will discuss cracking. And the remaining time that we have, I will try to give you the gist of isomerism and how the naming of compounds work. Okay? So it is 9:02. Let's come back at 9:10. Have an 8-minute break. See you on the other side.